Hi, my name is Ron Burglass. Stay with us here at KVCR because today I'm going to be talking with Chris Botti, star of Chris Botti in Boston. Hi, my name is Ron Burglass, and welcome to A Conversation With. Today, we'll be talking with Chris Botti, star of Chris Botti in Boston.
Isn't that great the way I worked that out?
Yes.
I'm the star of my own show.
Yeah, I think that works well. Before we start with any of the questions, tell me about Chris Botti in Boston.
Well, it's sort of a follow-up to our Chris Botti Live at the Wilshire Theater DVD. It's a combination of a DVD and a CD, and it's the opportunity for me to work in perhaps the most beautiful symphonic room to play music in, which is Symphony Hall in Boston. The Boston Pops with Keith Lockhart conducting, and joining us that night were some big-time heavyweights in both classical and rock and roll. So it was Yo-Yo Ma, Sting, Josh Groban, Steven Tyler, John Mayer, Catherine McPhee, a beautiful violinist named Lucia Miccarelli, all joining for 2 nights, and kind of it's a glorified, really, Chris Botti with friends, and it was just a magical 2 nights for me. And then they've made it all into a very posh, as they say, DVD and CD, which comes out in about 2 weeks in the United States.
Great, great. Tell me something. Where were you born?
I was born in Oregon, the jazz capital of the world.
Is it?
No, not at all, actually. There wasn't really anything for me to do in Oregon. There's not much to do in Oregon unless you're really super outdoorsy. Mm-hmm. And I just took to the trumpet when I was a kid. And in hindsight, I think growing up in a very isolated place like Oregon really worked to my advantage, because I was kind of fascinated with playing the trumpet and not necessarily with sneaking out of the house and running into the clubs in New York City or something like that. You know, that I really kind of had that focus, and it never left.
Why the trumpet? I mean, why not the accordion?
My father played accordion, actually, but my mother was a pianist, and I think I kind of rebelled against the keyboard a bit. But I really think it was television first. I saw Doc Severinsen way back when on The Tonight Show as the band leader. And it was the first thing that made me go, oh, I think that's interesting, you know, and I started to play the trumpet. And then what happens with so many young people is you realize at some point that you don't have the ability to become Michael Jordan. You know, that your body is not going to allow you to become an athlete, or your talent isn't going to allow you to become an athlete. So what do you do next? You know, how do you find a way to set yourself apart as a kid, to have some sort of meaning early on in your life? And using ego, I guess, in a really positive way. I wanted to make something. I wanted to do something with my time as a kid. And so that's really got me into practicing. And then when I was 12 or 13, I heard Miles Davis, and that did it. Like once, 3 notes of Miles Davis, and I knew a couple of things. I wanted to live in New York City, and I wanted to play the trumpet.
Just from listening to Miles Davis?
Yeah, basically listening to the first introduction to My Funny Valentine. And the sound of it was so powerful, because Doc Severinsen had all the showmanship, Louis Armstrong had all the showmanship, Dizzy Gillespie, but they all sort of work on playing the trumpet outward in a very kind of bold, brilliant, beautiful kind of trumpet playing. Miles kind of made it an inward, melancholy, heartbreaking. And I even recognized that heartbreak when I was a kid. You know, it just really spoke to me in a way that was powerful.
Why did you recognize it as a kid?
I don't know. I always used to just go off and listen to Miles, or even later, like with Frank Sinatra or something like that. And I always loved or recognized the appeal in the melancholy music. And I've said for many, many years that, you go to a show and everyone's up on their feet dancing or clapping. That's one thing, but the music that generally stays with a person for the course of their life is melancholy music. It's heartbreaking music. That's what really resonates in someone's life, and it can turn their emotion around on a dime. They listen to something in a car, and they hear a beautiful. I mean, we were talking about a beautiful Sarah McLachlan song just before we went to air, and how you were in a department store and heard it on and said, "That's a fantastic voice." Well, hello, it's a beautiful melancholy song, and it's called Angel, the name of that song. And so that's a great example of something that, if you look at somebody like her career, that's really her cornerstone of her career is that beautiful. And same goes for all the artists I love: Miles Davis, Joni Mitchell, whomever it is, Peter Gabriel, whatever it is. Sting, it's the beautiful stuff that really penetrates the heart.
Right. Let's step back a little bit. The name Botti.
Botti, sì.
Botti. It's Italian?
Yeah, my father's Italian, and I lived in Italy for a couple of years as a kid. My mother is Scottish. And,
really?
Yes. And so there is but the name, it's, we pronounce it, or my family decided to pronounce it a more American pronunciation, Botti, but in Italy it's pronounced Botti.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And how old were you when you lived in Italy?
I was in first and second grade.
All right.
Yeah, so really, really young, and I don't really remember a lot about it, to really impact my life. Although I've recently released an album called Italia, my desire to do an Italian record was more based on the global fascination with Italy. The romance and the art and the architecture and fashion and stuff. But more than just me living there, because.
But you chose some incredible songs for Italia.
Well, thank you.
I mean, I've listened to it, and it's amazing.
Thank you.
Why did you choose to record Nessun Dorma?
Well, that's sort of like for two reasons. I think that the melody is sort of hailed as one of the most pure and beautiful melodies. The arc of it, the kind of the drama that is in the simplicity of that melody is unmatched. And secondly, I had heard from a friend of mine, Gil Goldstein, who does a lot of arranging for me and was very, very good friends with Gil Evans, who was responsible for Miles Davis's Sketches of Spain record, that at the time when Miles was working with Gil before Gil passed, they were actually thinking about doing a version of Nessun Dorma, but, tailored for Miles. And I heard that and I was like, oh, man, that sounds like a natural fit. So I was quick to try to see what it would sound like with me playing it.
Well, it works a treat.
Oh, well,
it really works a treat. And Ave Maria, also beautiful on that album.
Thank you. A lot of the things on Italia, I think, would make the album so appealing are the arrangements. I mean, Ave Maria has been obviously recorded by so many different people, but we decided to record it with 60 voices behind me and a harp. And so it's in this beautiful church in England where we recorded it. And, we sweat the arrangements a lot. We might record 25 different songs, but there might be 3 different arrangements on each one. And we go in, that's not working. And it's got to have the right home for the song. And Ave Maria had the right home for it.
And you also recorded on the same album with Andrea Bocelli.
Yes, the song Italia, the idea to make an Italian record really came to me when I was on a flight, and we were out 2 years ago, I guess now, 3 years ago, on a promotional tour for PBS. And I said to the gentleman I was touring with, I want to make an Italian record, And he said, well, why don't you call it Italia? And I'm like, brilliant idea, and I landed, walked over to the phone, and picked up the phone and called David Foster as my first call, and said, David, I have this idea to do an Italian record, but I want the composition Italia to be a new song, and I want to do it with you. So look at your dates. Pick any day of the year. Just give me, doesn't have to be tomorrow or 6 months from now. Pick a day. I'll be there. And he said February 19th, and that would have been 2 years ago, February 19th. And we showed up at his house, and at the end of the day, at February 19th, not only we had the song, but David Foster had already called Andrea Bocelli to see if he'd like to guest on it, and it came out so beautifully.
Oh, it did. It really did. Now, let's get a little technical here.
Okay.
Your trumpets. I was reading about the trumpets that you play.
Well, it's really just this one.
Oh, it's just that one. But you've moved between trumpets.
No.
No?
I've had, in the course of my career, I've had really 2 trumpets. One I gave to someone who was instrumental in my career. And then now I have this one, which I've had for the last 7 years. And so my last 5 albums or 6 albums has all been done in this trumpet. 1939, very, very old. Same kind Miles Davis played, called the Martin trumpet.
Martin Committee handcraft trumpet.
Yes, Martin Committee handcraft. And it's the large bore, and they're very, very difficult to play. Now, unlike Joshua Bell's violin, it's not worth $4 million because it's metal, and when you introduce moisture or saliva into metal, over time it just disintegrates, whereas a violin can stay around for hundreds of years. And most people didn't realize how beautiful these instruments were, so they'd throw them out, or there was no inherent value attached to them. But for me, this particular horn, I mean, I've tried all the time to search for large bore handcrafts on eBay or through friends, and I play them, and they just, nothing. And this particular horn really feels like it's an extension of me in a way that I haven't felt before.
And it says it's a 3 silver-plated mouthpiece. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the mouthpiece is from 1926, and it's a Bach mouthpiece, and it's a 3, which is no relation to a 3C, which is kind of the standard mouthpiece most people play. But it's drilled out to a very, very big throat. The whole instrument is geared on the incredibly large diameter through the mouthpiece and through the bore and through the bell. And that's what gives it that kind of rounder, darker, more rich sound. Whereas a lot of trumpet players want something else different. They want a smaller, they want to play really super high, and they want it to be more piercing, like over a big band or a Latin ensemble. But I don't want that. I wanted that, the heartbreak thing. And so this works for that.
I saw you performing in that live concert that you did with Sting, and in that you had a trumpet, but it had a thing going into the horn piece.
Yeah. Well, it's just a microphone.
Oh, that was a microphone.
There's different ways to mount a microphone, but similar to what we have here
right.
on our bodies, you got to get a microphone somehow perched in this area on the trumpet. So either it clips on here, or it goes out here, or something. But depending on which microphone I was using at the time, that's what that is.
Well, maybe it's because you wandered around the stage so much. You just looked like you were so comfortable.
Yeah, well, the freedom of the microphone, will clip onto a belt pack, and it just enables me to move. And I, coming up as a jazz musician, but also being exposed to popular musicians as well, I always really liked the ability to see an instrumentalist's body language on stage. And so when they're just affixed to a stand-up microphone, it's very difficult to show any, emotions other than to stand and to blow directly into that microphone. You lose it. But with this, I can move around or interact with someone in the band, or and it really makes a huge difference.
And the microphone stuck right up inside the horn, doesn't?
It basically sits. It clips here,
right.
but then it goes out to here, and so it sits. The microphone actual piece is about 3 or 3.5, 4 inches in front of the bell.
Right. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You talked about the people that have influenced you, and I've got this list here. You talked about Miles Davis and Gil Evans and really wonderful, famous people like that. But I'm wondering about the people you studied with, why you studied with them. And I've got names here like David Baker and Bill Adam at Indiana University, Fred Sauter, is that how you pronounce it?
Fred Sauter, yes.
Larry McVeigh, Claude Gordon. Why did you choose to study with them? Who are they, and why did you choose to study with them?
Well, most of the gentlemen that you just said are all trumpet teachers. Bill Adam being really the reason why I have a well-accepted career is because of this gentleman who's 92 now, Mr. Adam, and in the trumpet world, known as a very, very famous trumpet teacher. David Baker is perhaps the most famous jazz educator in the world, and I studied with both of them at Indiana University. But I always kind of viewed my career, and a lot of people ask me, how did you get successful, or how do you know when you were successful finally? And I kind of look back, and those names that you brought up all bring back, parts of my life, But I viewed those relationships as stepping stones of a complete enthusiasm. Being able to study with Fred Sauter, who's the principal trumpet player in the Oregon Symphony, and then later with Bill Adam, or David Baker. Every year or couple of years that went by, I just viewed it like I'd already made it. I mean, to be able to go to Indiana University and play music with these teachers, these legendary teachers, I thought I'd made it already. I didn't really know until many, many years later how much foundation and great impact they would have on me, especially Bill Adam, what he would have done for me as a trumpet player, until I see so many young people and so many young kids scuffling, having a hard time with the trumpet. And part of the reason that I think a lot of kids have a hard time with a musical instrument, not only the trumpet or the piano or the cello, is because they lack the ability to digest repetition. And whether you're a golfer or a trumpet player, the things that are real similar about that is you have to, when you're 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, love doing the same thing every day. And that's not one day on, one day off, a week here, off for a week. I'm talking about 365 days a year, hours a day. And you got to love it. Scales over and over and over. It's just similar to hitting a golf club. You know, if you interviewed Tiger Woods, I'm sure he's going to say, I drove hundreds of thousands of golf balls throughout the course of my career and loved it. And Bill Adam and these other teachers really instilled upon me that ability to go to a practice room every day and find the magic or find some sort of enthusiastic approach to doing repetition. And I believe repetition and a young person is the thing that will make them go on in life to be a musician or to allow that thing to take them in a positive direction, whatever they do, business or whatever, or not, or to be a little scattered. And I'm, you know, that's kind of been my mantra lately.
So nobody ever had to say, come
Never.
on, Chris, time to practice.
Never.
No?
Never. Not once.
Wow.
Not once. And my friends would come over and knock on the door, let's go out and play sports or whatever. I'm like, yeah, sure. Maybe tomorrow after I'm done practicing, I can go out for an hour or something. I was crazy. You know, and I think that you have to, if you really want to be a kid in the arts, if you want to be a pop singer, you can get that overnight. You can, you know, watch a few videos. If you have some voice, if you look the part, if you have a style, that it's okay. You can bypass a lot of that. But to play these kind of instruments, you got to make, you got to roll that dice when you're a kid, and to roll that dice and not have the other, you know, the Game Boy and the internet and all the things that lunge at a kid to divert their attention. Then you know, you lose the a lot of kids don't want to take that chance. So you got to be a bit crazy to jump off that cliff of practicing, you know.
I want to get back to your feelings about children and music, but I just wanted to ask you before we leave this subject behind. Bill Adam apparently said to you, if your mind leaves the sound of the horn, obstacles will appear. Do you remember him saying that?
Sure.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, his way of teaching was, you know, I mean, that is one thing he would say, but to give you an example, he would sit me down and not say anything. He'd go, I'll play a note and you play the note. And he'd play the note, and then I would play the note, and then he'd play the next note. Long tones, just, you know, broad, you know. All right, young man, now you play. And so I'd play the note, and I'm like, I've traveled all the way from Indiana University for this. And the next one he played, then I'd play the note, and he wouldn't say anything. At the end of the hour, we'd be doing all these exercises. He'd go, all right, I'll see you next week. And I'm like, huh? I wanted some beautiful jam. I wanted some... And then I realized that he's trying to, rather than fill me with words or maps or books, he's trying to fill me with just the sound. Keep, like he said, keep your mind in that sound, because once you divert your mind away from the sound via books or being the abstract stuff, then you're not present. You know, similar to if I took a baseball and threw it as hard as I could at your head, you'd go, boom, you grab it, or you deflect it. You wouldn't say to yourself, my hand will now extend 5 degrees this way, turning and rotating. And in other words, your brain is engaged in that ball traveling to you, just like my ears were engaged in that sound when Mr. Adam played. And that's what he means by being present, being in the sound. You'd be surprised, adults, kids, older folks, middle-aged, how many people are not present in the thing that they are getting up every morning to do. Whatever their job is, they're not present. And I think that music makes you present, or you will get hurt. And the trumpet will humiliate you. If you're not present, you walk out on that stage, you're not paying attention to this thing, and you're not present, it will embarrass you in front of everyone. You'll crack up and miss notes, and, you know, it's not fun.
Does that ever happen to you?
Well, not all the time, but I mean anymore. But I remember when I was a member of Sting's band, we had flown from Japan to United States to Japan. Long flight, arrived. I was tired, and I thought, yeah, I don't need to practice. It'll be fine. And Sting, we walk out on stage and we play the thing, and we're getting ready to do my big feature. And Sting introduces me, and it's Moon Over Bourbon Street. And so and I have the pickup, and it's supposed to be. That's the, you know, it's a little bit of a Louis Armstrong introduction, right? All by myself. The Japanese audience, very quiet, 15, 20, 30,000 people. I don't know how many people. I hadn't practiced, and it sounded something like. Now, if you do that in front of 30,000 adoring Sting Japanese fans, and you're the person that is making Sting buckle over with laughter because it was hilarious, but it was so embarrassing. And at that moment, I think that was 2000. I said, I don't care how far I have to fly. The moment I land, I'll go into a practice room in the bathroom of a hotel and warm up for 45 minutes, just to solidify, to be present on the horn before I go on that stage.
Speaking of practice, you keep mentioning kids, and I know that kids working with music is important to you. Can you tell us in what way and how and why?
Well, I want ultimately children to find the love and fascination that I have with music. And unfortunately, we are in a world right now that operates all against that. The iPhone, the multiple choice of things that you have. People ask me now all the time, hey, what's playing on your iPhone? And I'll go, the same things, the same 5 albums. I just listen to the same things since I was a kid. Everything that's joyful for me in music is wrapped up in maybe not 5, but maybe 20 albums. And nowadays, kids want everything out in front of them. And so I think music is a great way for parents to get a kid to focus, and really ultimately what I was saying earlier, to be present. And so that's why I go around to every gig I perform at and remind the parents that classical music, jazz music, you're not going to have another generation of classical music or jazz musicians unless you bring your kids to see a concert. See, because it's the visual connection that makes a kid want to be Michael Jordan or Doc Severinsen or Miles Davis, right? So you want kids to come to a concert and see it, but also you want them, more importantly, to go home and practice and get away from the bad influences and deal with it, and that's really kind of what I do, So I try to get a kid, talk to him, and try to get him to find joy and passion in those scales and that instrument.
Do you go to schools? Do you speak?
We do schools? Whenever we can. We more often than not than we have like a master class come to our sound check and then I'll talk. I mean, I'm on the road 350 days a year, 320 days a year, something like that. So it's very difficult for me to get to a school early. We're usually traveling during the day, but then we'll have them come to the sound check and I'll chat with the kids and run my mouth.
You were talking before that you've worked with Catherine McPhee, you were in Sting's band, and but those are recent people. You've also recorded with Dean Martin.
Well, the Dean Martin was on yeah. Well, the Dean Martin was a relatively recent collaboration. Obviously, Dean's vocals were recorded in 1957, and then we married it with everything new for the Italia record, which was a bit of absolute fun, but ultimately it's the technological trickery that we've grown accustomed to with Nat Cole and Natalie Cole and all that.
But it works.
It works beautifully. All recorded in the same room and the same equipment, basically, that they recorded Dean's stuff on. But in my career, I really sort of had 2 kind of big breaks. In my late 20s, I joined Paul Simon's band for what would be a year and a half long world tour with some legendary musicians, Michael Brecker on saxophone, the late, incredibly great Michael Brecker, Steve Gadd on drums, Richard T on piano, a bunch of Brazilian musicians, some great African musicians, and then, of course, Paul. And I learned so much from that. After that tour ended, I came back to New York and tried to do what they say in the business, get a record deal. I had to go find a home for my music. And to do that, to put out a demo and to think of a concept and then go get a record deal took 2 or 3 years. And then I started recording jazz albums. But all that sort of went to another level when Sting asked me to join his band. I mean, I'm sitting here today speaking to you in large part because of my association with Sting. He exposed the sound of my trumpet to the whole world. And through his music, I got a lot of fans. And so subsequently, after I left his band, I opened up for his band throughout the world, and he's been like family to me and made my career.
I wanted to ask you, we've just got a couple of minutes left. If there was one thing that you really wanted to do that you have left to do musically, and one person to do it with, what would that be, and who would it be with?
Well, I mean, boy, I would have said last year, one more thing, I would love to work with Yo-Yo Ma. Well, he's on our Boston show, and it was such an honor to play with him. From the what if category, I suppose, I would love to do one of these days a duet with Peter Gabriel.
Wow.
And I just think that that the texture and the honesty and the emotion in his voice is really, really unmatched. And when you know, he's in that league, of course, with Sting and Sinatra, and for me, the music that I love, Joni Mitchell and Peter Gabriel is as powerful a communicator as Miles Davis to me, and I just think the world of him. And one of these days, I'd love to make some music with Peter Gabriel. Yeah.
What's in the future? What's coming up next?
Touring. I mean, I actually have no residence. I don't. Probably of anyone you've ever spoken to in the entertainment industry, and everyone says, "Oh, I live out of a suitcase," but I live out of one suitcase. I have no mailing address. I have no photos. I don't own anything except this trumpet, a carry-on bag, and one very large 70-pound suitcase. Wow. And so for me, I tour, and I feel every day when I walk on that stage incredibly grateful that there's an audience, that there's ability for me to go around the world and make music.
Well, listen, Chris, thank you very, very much for coming in today for my first interview.
I'm so proud to be on the maiden voyage of your career.
Yeah,
Good
you've
luck.
been great. You've made it easy.